What if you had the opportunity to not only care for the animals in your home, but to also care for the animals in your backyard? What might it feel like for you to extend the compassion that you have for the critters that are closest to you, to animals living in the wild that you may have never met, that you may never even see? What kind of opportunities might that afford you as an animal advocate? These are some of the questions and ideas we're going to explore today on the Street Dog podcast, brought to you, of course, by the Street Dog Coalition. We are a national nonprofit providing free veterinary care and related services to pets of people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. I'm your host, Daria Tavana, and I'm also the Director of Development at the Street Dog Coalition. And today I am so excited to welcome Kristin Combs, the Executive Director of Wyoming Wildlife Advocates, to the podcast. Woo! Kristin's here. I'm going to give you a lovely intro, Kristin. So, Kristin has spent years working in nonprofit administration, public and private science education, and wildlife advocacy. And her passion lies in making science accessible to all and ensuring that wildlife is protected through science-based management. Kristin has been a dedicated advocate for animals throughout her whole life, volunteering with the Teton Wildlife Rehabilitation Center and fighting for both wildlife and domestic animals' rights. I know Kristin's also a mentor to youth, young adults, and professionals, and I'm just really so thrilled to have Kristin here today to talk about this intersection of wildlife conservation and domestic animal welfare and how we can foster a more compassionate community for all creatures. So again, welcome to the podcast, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Daria. It's so good to be here. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh my gosh, of course. It is really, really a pleasure. Your credentials are so cool and inspiring and I feel like very unique to you. So I know this is gonna be like a singular, awesome conversation. And Kristin, why don't you just kick things off for us by just sharing a bit about your journey into wildlife advocacy and how your passion for animal welfare evolved?
Yeah, I think back to like when I was going into my undergrad and I was like, well, what do I want to do? How can I help animals the best? Or, I knew I wanted to work with like nature, animals. I've always loved animals. I'm the girl that had like 500 stuffed animals and no dolls. And, it's always been a part of who I am. So, I never really, specifically knew what that would look like. And education kind of was my, like, I would say gateway to advocacy because I realized like how important it is for people to just like know what's going on out there. People really can't, you can't expect people to do anything or take action unless they know about what's going on. So, I spent a lot of time when we first moved to the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, just learning about, every plant and bird and animal that's here. And I just remember like buying as many field guides as I could find and just poring over them. And I'm a nerd like that. So it basically, was feeding my soul, but at the same time, I was like learning about all these wildlife issues and just like blown away by how on the surface it looks like this place, Yellowstone and the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is like this wildlife paradise, but then like you start looking beneath the surface and you start to see like, okay, there's a lot more going on here and these animals actually do need our help as well. So I taught at public school for a while. I taught at the Teton Science schools. In like doing field education and that really like was such a great I'm so thankful for that experience because it made me realize that people have to experience things for themselves in order to really truly learn it and then moving on to teaching in the classroom. I brought that with me and was so happy to like be able to do labs and things with kids and take them on field trips and stuff like that. So and then, I felt like I wasn't having as much of an impact as I really wanted to have. And after that, I just dove right into the direct advocacy world and haven't looked back since.
That is amazing. And there's so much that I know I can relate to there. Um, people who support our organization can relate to there. So one of our core values, the Street Dog Coalition, is compassionate activism. And I think, your journey speaks directly to the compassionate activists in all of us. And for me personally here, I'm gonna get grim. I don't know if it's because it's just like a rainy day right now, and I'm feeling the doom and gloom, but I specifically remember the beginning stages of my compassionate activism journey. I started doing what you did, and I started just learning so much information. And part of my learning all this information was learning a lot of like terrible things that are going on in the world caused by
Mm.
humans, animal suffering. And I don't know if like I experienced the stages of grief or something. Like in the beginning, I was like in denial about it, read about it, and then just like shut down and was like angry and shouting at the sky about all these horrible things that I learned that animal agriculture and just human intervention, the impact of these things on animals. And I'm curious to know, did you have an experience like that? You've painted this
Absolutely.
experience so beautifully, and now I'm like, give us the
No,
good, the bad, the ugly.
I can like pinpoint at 12 years old. I think I read The Jungle and had like gotten some information about like factory farming or something. And I just made up my mind. I'm like, I'm not eating animals anymore. Like, I'm just not doing that. And I became a vegetarian. And I remember like my parents just being like, what? Like, why? And they were supportive, but that was definitely my moment of like, oh my God, now I know this information. I can't like just keep going on.
Yeah.
And I think that that personal journey is the same for a lot of people. Of like
Okay, good.
you
I
learn
agree.
something and you're like, I can't act like I don't know it now.
Oh, we gotta get a billboard. We gotta get that written on a billboard. I love that you and I and so many of our supporters are just like trauma bonded. And I think, for some people they learn this information and unfortunately, for one reason or another, we'll give them grace, kind of resort to like complacency. But I really appreciate how this seemed to kind of light a fire under you and inspire you to start learning more about wildlife and domestic animals. And I guess my question for you now is how do you see the treatment of wildlife and domestic animals? How is that connected? And I know you might mostly be speaking from your experience in Wyoming, but what is the relationship between how we treat wildlife and how we treat domestic animals?
It's really stark here in Wyoming because we have so few laws that cover domestic animals. We're actually the only state to still have a gas chamber to euthanize shelter pets.
Mm.
And it's uh, there is this disconnect. The people here, do love wildlife, but it's in a very like utilitarian sense. And I think that that is one of the things that has been pervasive throughout domestic animal culture as well as like, people using dogs either for work or, you have a dog to like protect your home. So you're chaining it up outside. And for me, especially one thing that always just really strikes me is like, I don't know how people can hate wolves and love their dogs. Like that just does not correlate for me. And people here do. I mean, they love their dogs, but then once again, it's in that other sense of like it might be a farm dog or a working dog, or a livestock guardian dog. And not to say that people don't love those animals, they do. It's just a different, like a very different way than I grew up treating animals. And, like my dog is basically my son. I mean, he he is my kid. And like I can't, he sleeps in our bed with us. He's part of the family. He goes
Oh,
everywhere
you're
with us.
preaching to the
So
choir
yeah,
here.
exactly. I
We
know,
get it.
right?
We get it.
So it's a different feel, of like this utilitarian sense of animals versus like this is another being that deserves rights and fair treatment. And I think that that is very pervasive throughout the West for domestic animals and wildlife. And especially if you're talking about like a wild animal that's being trapped for its fur or something like that, it's just a very different sense of thinking about your relationship to wild animals or animals, domestic animals, and like almost a lack of compassion there. Like I'm an empath. I'm sure that you are, and I'm sure that everybody that supports you also is. And so it's hard for me to like climb into somebody's head that doesn't also, feel what their pet is feeling or feel what that wild animal might be feeling. Yeah, so the intersection is there because it has to be people caring about animals in a more compassionate way for us to make progress.
And
And I
and do,
think that's going to be, some
yeah,
generational shift as well over time.
tell me about it. Yeah, I think there's so much to kind of unpack here, and what I'm hearing mostly is almost this like disconnect, right? This cognitive dissonance between the animals that go to bed with us and the animals that go to sleep in Wyoming, I'm sure, just yards away from our own back door, and how, scientifically speaking, there are so many similarities between some of these animals, like a dog and a wolf. More so, of course, than a dog and a lizard. But so do you find that in education, in educating the public and educating young people, and kind of unpacking this disconnect for people, um, I guess the question is like, how do you do that? Do you try to shine a light on the fact that these wild animals have a lot in common with our domestic animals? And if so, how would you do that when you're like advocating on behalf of like animals with feathers and with fins that might not have a cute smushy face like a dog? I'm asking you 10 million questions here.
That's okay.
Lay
I
it on me.
totally get what you're getting at. I mean, you're right. It's, people that don't like the cute and cuddly things do get the most attention. I mean, we just kind of know that. I think that we have a lot of work to do with education, and you're not going to change the mind of somebody who's in, their 60s or 70s and they're doing things the way they're doing things. It's just that's one thing that I've learned over years of advocacy is just those folks are kind of gone because they're coming from a place of values. Like everybody is making decisions based on their values and like how they were raised and what values they hold dear. And so somebody might really, think that that dog that they're chained up outside, like that they're treating it really well and that it's, they love that animal. But it is a different sense than somebody, that's obviously like having their dog in their house. And I think about like some of our neighbors and stuff that, treat their dogs differently. And it's, it, it definitely is we've got to really focus on the younger generation for education and I'm a big fan of like ambassador animals. I think that having a wolf go into a classroom or taking a coyote into a classroom and letting kids see like, oh, it's just like my dog, like this is just like an animal that I have at home, and letting them see that is important to like building that compassionate bond with another species. And because otherwise it's like always what's out there, like what's
Right.
that's out there, that's in
Out
the
of sight, out
world.
of mind.
Absolutely, yes. And especially like you said, for like reptiles and birds and things like I mean, I was horrified to like learn that some of my students used to like shoot chickadees. I'm just like, what in the world? Why would you ever shoot a chickadee? It's like the cutest bird in the world. Why would you do that? So, it's just I think we have a long way to go with education, and it's all about compassionate education and really like helping kids learn that like extending that compassion to domestic and wild animals and maybe even like farmed animals and stuff too is it's all important, and like those animals have feelings and are just the same as our pets.
Yes, louder for the people in the back. Oh, I feel less alone hearing you say that. That's so many, I think, important points t- to be made here. And what I'm hearing really just kind of shine through everything you're sharing is that just because, these wild animals are not animals we see every day, animals we hear every day, animals we think to care for immediately, does not mean that their life is any more or less important to them than the life of our dog. And I really appreciate that. I think that all these animals are the same in the ways that matter most, in that they're
Absolutely.
sentient, they have experiences, they feel fear, they feel joy, for the most part, making broad generalizations here. So my question for you next here is, Kristin, what are some of the biggest challenges you see facing Wyoming wildlife and domestic animals? Like on a broad scale, what are these challenges, and how can our supporters make a difference to protect both wild and domestic animals, almost in like one fell swoop, right? Is there like an action we can take to help both sides of the coin here in our communities?
I think it like doing things in other states does have an impact on Wyoming and other Western states. Like, I think that's something that sometimes people don't think of is, for example, right now, there's a campaign against these wildlife killing contests that are just, a blood sport that people are just going out and shooting animals for fun. And so, as we've seen like state after state, there's 8 states now that all have some kind of law in the books about prohibiting these wildlife killing contests. And that's how if you look at like historical social movements, that's a lot of ways that things get changed is you start having like one state, then another state, then another state, and finally it builds to this potential, this sort of crescendo, and there's some kind of federal law that happens. And so we are looking at federal action as well to try and get something from the top down because, even if we were to get wildlife killing contest or running over animals with snowmobiles, which is something that happens here in Wyoming. Even if we were to get to that, outlawed here, we would still have that going on in other states. And it's like, why would we wait to do it piecemeal when we can just, maybe have a federal law that covers that? It's like wildlife torture in general. And that is, anything that you can be done for domestic animals in other states gives us ammunition and helps us like be able to point at other states and say, okay, here's a law that they have on the book. This state still has hunting, they still have fishing, they still do things, but there's this law that protects, against these most heinous acts that shouldn't be done to any animal, and whether that's domestic or wildlife. And so, like fundamentally, and that's one of my biggest frustrations right now is like fundamentally in Wyoming, we're trying to get torture banned. Like, if there is one issue that permeates every political sphere and background, it's torture. People don't agree with torture unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath. And so like we should have laws to prevent those bad actors in society from being able to do that. And it's just like mind-boggling that we are having a trouble we're having trouble here in Wyoming even getting that basic level of protection for wildlife and domestic animals. I
Mhm.
would say that one of the worst animals that has the worst treatment here in Wyoming is are horses. I mean,
Mm.
they're considered like livestock. They're not really pets here. I mean, so many, cases of starvation and just neglect and leaving horses out in the woods. And, it's just, there's so many things. And so we have to really, like, as domestic animal laws strengthen, we start to have an easier time of getting those, extended to wildlife as well. So I think it really is important for wherever you are and whatever you're doing in your state, like don't think that doesn't have an impact on other states too, because it does. And it's always people are always surprised to hear that like things that go on in Wyoming, they're like, oh, what, that doesn't happen in my state. And then they really look and they're like, oh, we don't have a law here against that. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, maybe I need to go to my senator or my congressperson and ask them, like, Why do we not have a law against that here? So, yeah, it's a collective effort, and it takes a lot of people in a lot of different places doing their own thing where they're at. And like, I think people get overwhelmed. They think, well, how can I make any change against this huge system that's like set up against us? It's like just do what you can where you are. And that is so important. I have this book. I cannot remember for the life of me the author's name, but it's like the Tao for animal activists.
Oh, wow.
And it really like does kind of change. It changed my perspective as an activist because it made me realize that like, be the change that you wish to see is really like those words are really true. Like it starts at the level of each person individually. And it's hard when you see like all these injustices going on to not just want to rail against that. But you do have to like just kind of look inward and be like, okay, what is the thing that I can do that does make a change and that, will make a change someday? Like we are laying the foundation today for people that will come, tomorrow. It took 70 years for women to get the right to vote. Like,
Yes.
don't forget that. And it takes everybody everywhere doing things. So
Mm.
I just can't encourage people enough to just do what you can where you are, and you are making a difference, even if it's just in one animal's life. That's
This
all.
is this is everything. This is so inspiring, and um, one of our another of our core values at the Street Dog Coalition is unconditional love. And for me, my activism started to evolve and change a little bit once I started to take the unconditional love I felt toward my cats, toward my dog, and extend that to other animals that that don't provide me with a sense of comfort when I'm sad, or provide me with company whenever I'm alone. So I do think that to some extent it can be a bit self-serving to only care for your animals, and there's nothing wrong with only caring for your animals. But I do feel like, as one of our core values being unconditional love, it can be really powerful to extend that love to other animals and to other people who need that love the most. And of course, in our case, as an organization, to people who rely on the relationships that they have with their animals. And this call that you have to to our listeners to kind of get involved however they can really excites me. I'm reminded of this book that I read about activism. Here we are both struggling to remember names of books. Um, but there is this like Venn diagram of like three circles, and for individuals who are interested in maybe dipping a toe into activism or getting more involved in their community, creating this Venn diagram consists of, one circle being a list of everything that you're good at. Another circle being a list of things that you really enjoy doing. It could be one of the things you're good at, could be fundraising. One of the things you enjoy doing could be, art, creating art of some kind. And then in that third little Venn diagram, we have things that the movement really needs right now. So the movement right now might need more money. So if you take a look at that Venn diagram that you've created, things you're good at, things the community really needs, things that you enjoy doing, using some of the examples I just shared, you might see an overlap in different opportunities. Like for example, maybe doing like an art auction fundraiser to raise funds for a specific nonprofit. Since you're good at fundraising, you like to make art, and our sector, of course, needs all the money it can get. So I was just inspired by what you were saying to kind of recall that three Venn diagram thing. And this is like, I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is like some kind of there's like a beautiful Japanese word. I think it's ikigai. I think it's ikigai is the word that that basically talks about that intersection of those three things. So here I am
Love that.
talking
I
too
absolutely
much,
love that.
but
No, I love that. I love that idea. And I think that that is something that people get hung up on is like, well, I don't feel comfortable making phone calls or whatever, so I can't do anything. It's like, no, you can do something. Everyone can do anything, can do something to like further the cause. That's I just literally talked to somebody yesterday who said those words to me of like, I can't be on the front lines. I just like, it's too overwhelming for her. She's like, I can't be out there doing the things, even though she did come to a rally of ours. But she's like, what I can do is I can give money. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm like, that is fine. Like you don't need to do all the things, it's a collective effort of a lot of people doing a lot of different things. And I don't know. I think I talked about this in DC of like this wolf that was tortured here in Wyoming and how horrible that was. But some of the art that has come out of that and the creative stuff that has happened because of it is just like that like feeds my soul. I'm like so happy that somebody that has this amazing artistic talent can, use that then to like help tell this story
mm,
and make people care about it because it does take a lot to make people care about things. And just like also going back to something else you said, it is a different sense of activism to care about something in an altruistic way, like that you're not really receiving any benefit. And I go back to a time when there was two fundraising events going on the same night at the same like hotel here in Jackson. And one of them was for Trout Unlimited. And it was like a huge ballroom and the place was packed and there were hundreds of people, I would say. And then there was the fundraiser I was going to, which was for the Wyoming Wilderness Association. And it was a very small room of people, and it was people that were super passionate about that. But it's a different thing. Like most people that support Trout Unlimited, I'm not saying that they don't do great work. They do. They do a lot of habitat restoration, but they care about it because they like to go out and fish for trout.
right.
It's a different thing to want to support and care about something that really I mean, wilderness does benefit all of us in some way. I mean, I'm happy that it's out there. I love that I can go places with my dog that don't have snowmobiles and stuff. So it does benefit me, but not like super directly. I don't even know if you know what I'm saying. It's just, and
Oh,
I would
totally.
imagine that sphere is probably also felt within like, domestic pets and domestic wildlife. I mean, domestic animals, maybe like horses and pigs and stuff like that. Maybe people don't feel as strongly about protecting those animals as they do, like their own dogs or other dogs and cats. I don't know. It's just something that I think people need to be aware of that if
Yeah.
protecting something or advocating for something altruistically. I mean, I'm never going to be able to like, cuddle up with a grizzly bear, let alone even touch a grizzly bear. So, and that's one of the things like I think back to, when I was younger and in my like when I was beginning college and stuff, I was like, I want to work with animals and like, I thought about maybe I should be a zookeeper or something like that where I get to really interact with them. Most of the time I'm at my computer. I'm not even close to animals. So, it's
You and I both.
right. I tell people it's like this is the most non-glamorous job ever.
And this is so exciting because I got to tell you, as we wrap this conversation up, you are going to get a lot of supporters. I'm fingers, toes, paws crossed from our community because our community is full of people who give and give and give honestly with no expectation of getting anything in return.
Absolutely. Yep.
Really, just individuals who care not only about protecting the human animal bond, but also about protecting animals that don't belong to them, protecting animals they may see once and never again, um, and protecting the people who love those animals. So this idea of just giving a part of yourself to a cause in order to, grow the cause, expand the impact of the cause, and make an impact on animals and people that you may never meet, as we are both doing here just by having this conversation is really huge. And Kristin, I want to, or rather, this is to our audience. I want to let you know that in the show notes, I have linked down below, a little website for you to explore everything that Kristin has been chatting about here, for you to take a look at Wyoming Wildlife Advocates' website, for you to make a donation, please and thank you to their cause. Tis the season of giving. Giving Tuesday is over, but I know that a lot of people are feeling the feels. A lot of people are cozied, cuddled up in bed with their animals right now, maybe even listening to this, and in constant search of inspiration to improve the lives of animals around them. And make sure that they protect the areas that those animals call home. So, Kristin, I want to thank you so much. You are awesome. This was so much fun. I have learned so much about the intersection between wildlife, between domestic animals, and I want to thank you, especially for taking the time to chat with us today. And I want to thank our supporters for taking the time to tune in. Again, I'm going to urge you all to please click the link in our show notes, learn a little bit more about this organization, make a donation, please and thank you. And yeah, Kristin, anything else you wanted to layer onto that before I let you go?
I just wanted to also say thank you to all of your supporters and what your organization does. It's really important that we are taking care of animals that are with homeless people. Like you said, sometimes that is their only link to, to feeling that love and compassion. And I can tell that like everybody that supports you all is also, a very compassionate person. And that's what it's about. It's about love over hate. And there are a lot of broken people in this world who, will take that kind of stuff out on animals. And we just have to constantly be here to either help those people heal or have laws to protect against, animals being harmed by them. So it sounds like we're both doing the same thing, just with different species. And I can't say thank you enough to having me on. And you're awesome as well. And thank you for everything that Street Dog Coalition does as well.
Thank you so much, Kristin. And please, when you're working on a new initiative, let me know. We'll bring you back on the podcast. I'm happy to, share more about your organization with our followers on social media. And, in the meantime, until we meet again, I'm going to go check out your website again right now because I really enjoyed it the first time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Take care,
having me.
Kristin. Thank you so much.
All right, you too.
Adios.
Adios. Bye.